Hello everybody! Welcome to my review of the Spirit Animal Oracle by baron-reid. As always, I am super excited to share some information about this deck with you and go over my experiences with it and my thoughts and feelings about it. As always, this video is not sponsored. I am a fan of baron-reid's work. This is not the only deck that I have from her. I also have a copy of the Enchanted Map Oracle, not the new edition with the turquoise cover, but the original one. That is a more new deck to my collection, but I'm really enjoying that one as well. So I've got lots of good things to say about this deck, so let's just get started right away with the box, of course. So this box is really nice and sturdy. It's got a nice simple design on it. You open it up. It has the little pull tab, the guidebook, and the inside of this box has this really nice pattern on it. And it says here, the spirits residing in the natural world have much to share, and the secrets of their forgotten language are now available to you. And then on either side here, we have a few of the different animals in the deck. And it says the abundant universe will provide on either side here. So this box has held up for me really well. You might notice there is very minimal amounts of damage to it. Any little nicks and bumps it may have are probably just from me moving, as I've had this deck for multiple years, not sure how many at this point. So it has moved a few houses with me, which is bound to do at least a little tiny bit of chipping to most deck boxes. So, high quality box for sure. The guidebook to this deck is amazing. The introduction to it is 38 pages long. And you might think, wow, that seems like a lot of pages. Well, firstly, the pages are pretty small. So it's not as much as it sounds like. And secondly, I would say that the guidebook is probably like the most important, most standout aspect of this deck, at least from my perspective. If you are someone who really reads intuitively and you tend to not pay much attention to the guidebook, and you have this deck or plan on getting this deck, I would highly recommend that you read the guidebook. The way that baron-reid writes these is just incredible. She really does have a way with words, especially in this guidebook in particular. So a few of the things, and I'm not going to show you the introduction pages because I don't want to take away from the words in this guidebook. I'd like you guys to be able to read it for yourself if you have the chance. But just as a quick summary of some of the things that it goes over, it explains kind of how oracle decks work and the concept of synchronicities. It also says a little bit about the best way to work with the deck, and it includes multiple spreads. It has a 1-card spread, a 2-card spread, 2 different 3-card spreads, and a 7-card new moon spread. I've tried all of these spreads, and I like them all quite a lot. I find them all very helpful. We'll take a look at some of those spreads in action a bit later on in the video. And it also gives you a message from the deck and from the sort of spirit animal guides that are channeled by the deck. So there's a 1 card and a 2 card message that's channeled and interpreted in the introduction to this guidebook. It also mentions how the messages in this guidebook and from this oracle are all channeled, and that the higher spirits associated with these spirit animals specifically chose to show themselves and make themselves a part of this deck. And I do very truly believe that when she says that. As someone who is experienced with channeling myself, I can definitely recognize that a lot of the messages that I read in this guidebook feel channeled to me. So I really like that about this deck. There's this really unique, comforting sort of tone to a lot of the messages that I think in part comes from the fact that these messages are channeled. So let's take a closer look at the cards here, and I'll talk a bit about the cardstock. The cardstock is matte, which I appreciate. I don't have a particular preference if a deck is glossy or matte, but both kinds of cards have their ups and their downs. I will say when I first had this deck for a while, it felt a little bit sticky, it took some time for the cards to loosen up and really start to get that glide. But they are nice and thick. I haven't had a single nick on any of these cards. They've all held up super well. And I use this deck pretty often. If you ever look at some of my collective readings that I do on TikTok, this deck will often call to me when I'm doing those. So I do use this deck for collective readings quite a lot, as well as just for personal use. So the cards will definitely not be super glidey, especially when you first get them. But the trade-off with that is that although it may feel a little bit resistant to shuffling at first, depending on your shuffling style, of course, you do get a really high quality card that's going to last you for a good long time. So I do really like the cardstock here. And the backing as well is beautiful. I love the colors on it. And these cards can be read in reverse as well as upright. We'll talk a little bit more about that later when we are taking a closer look at the cards, and maybe we'll get some reversed cards in the reading section of the video as well. So let's take a look at these cards together, and I'll share a little bit about what cards really stand out to me and what I really like about this deck. First of all, I want to point out the colors, the usage of color in this deck is just incredible. There's a really good variety of different colors presented throughout the deck and even throughout the cards themselves. Another thing you'll notice is that a few of the animals in this deck have things you wouldn't normally associate with animals, like piercings or crowns and stuff like that. If you are looking for a deck that is just purely realistic animals, these animals are going to have aspects that are not necessarily feeling realistic to how you would see an animal present itself in real life. But I find that feels like an intentional part of the deck, as this deck is connected with the spirits and the sort of spirit animal guides associated with each animal. They're a little bit more than just a creature. So personally, I enjoy those extra unique touches that sort of give a reminder that there's more to this than just being a typical animal that you would find on the streets, right? The bobcat spirit comes up a lot for me. It's a really, really good card that just sort of talks about like how there's so much mystery and magic to life, and how sometimes you have to learn how to embrace that rather than always searching for answers. Because a lot of the time you're not going to find answers, and it's just a really good thing to be reminded of. Brown bear spirit comes out a lot for me as well. Taking time to rest. This deck is just really calming and comforting. I'd say the personality of this deck is like a security blanket, or, you know, being wrapped up in a warm hug. You'll see all the cards look kind of like gentle and light and inviting and colorful, of course. I love how they have like these gradients of color in the background. They're all just so beautiful. This deck is really good to use as a pick-me-up. It's really good at giving advice, like especially when I read with the guidebook. This deck, even though I have come to develop a bond with it, and so I no longer necessarily need to reach for the guidebook every time I pull a card, I do still reach for the guidebook, especially if I'm doing a reading for someone else, because I find that the way things are worded in the guidebook is just so like beautiful and touching and heartfelt, and it really gets straight to the point. So even if my interpretation of a card might be very similar to what the guidebook will say, I do often like to read from it. So it'll just be like a paragraph or two, because I just really love the way that things are worded in that guidebook. And this deck always will come through with the exact message that you're going to need to hear. I love how this eagle looks. He's just so like in power. I love the inclusion of the electric eel. I mean, how often do you see an eel given its own card in a deck, right? And for context, this is definitely not the only animal-based deck that I have. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about how this compares to some of my other animal decks. Like I said earlier, because this is a much more spiritual look into the animal world, the meanings are going to be less, let's say, biologically based. It's going to be a lot more of a spiritual thing. So if you're looking for an animal deck that focuses more on messages relating to how this animal acts in real life, or you want a more balance between light and dark sort of animal deck, because the animal kingdom can often be quite brutal. I'd say that a deck that does a good job of focusing on biological or scientific aspects of the animals and sort of the way the animal kingdom will behave and compete for survival and resources. The Animal Totem Tarot is another animal deck I have that does a really good job of that. That being said, this deck is not afraid of the dark. It's not afraid of saying what needs to be said. The way this deck works is that it will have an upright message, which is called the Oracle message in the Guidebook, and then its reverse message is called the Protection message. And I always like to tell people that it sort of has that two sides to it, where the protection message is a lot more likely to be more blunt, or it'll cover more of the shadow sort of aspects of the meaning of the card. So for someone who wants this deck to be purely like light and positivity, you could try reading it without reverse cards. I suggest doing it with the reverse cards, because even though they are more shadowy cards, the reverse cards are still, at their core, uplifting positive messages. It'll just focus a bit more on the darker side of the situation. And I'm really focusing on this card because this one is just so powerful when it comes up, the Koi Fish Spirit, talking about the abundance that we have around us and how we shouldn't take that for granted. Lizard Spirit, dream the world into being. Another thing the Guidebook does that it talks about a lot is the term co-create comes up a lot, although there's no sort of definition given for that by the author. And this is a card that comes up for me all the time as well. Like all the time. So the way that I've come to understand that, and maybe we'll see the term co-create come up when we read some of the cards in the Guidebook later on. But the way I've come to interpret that is that it's sort of another way of referring to manifestation. This deck is really good at picking up on collective energy. Like I said, I use it for collective readings quite often. It's really good at sort of talking about things that are affecting the collective, affecting all of us, and it'll help you feel less alone. Is really sort of humanizing in the way that the messages it'll give you, you're like, oh yeah, right, like this is a natural thing for me to be feeling and for me to be going through, and it's totally okay for me to be in this stage of my life, and I'm not alone in this. This is something that the rest of the universe can relate to some degree. Peacock Spirit, of course, beautiful. And I also love how I'm just noticing now how this card doesn't have a background to it. You know, the peacock is letting its feathers take up the entire space of the card. So it really gives that message of taking up space and allowing your true colors to shine and to just really stand out. I love that. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. So I've come to understand co-create as another term for manifestation that rather than focusing on you being a singular person who is by yourself, creating your own destiny through manifestation, the idea of co-creation is like you are creating your best future alongside the universe. It's not just about you manifesting what you might think is best for you from a place of ego or desire, but it's about growing and manifesting alongside the universe and being in tune with that universal plan and that universal energy. That's how I've come to interpret that phrase as I read it, as it comes up in my readings with this deck. Someone else might have their own way of defining that term, and that's totally fine. This is such a beautiful seahorse. I love seahorses so much. And skunks as well. Skunks are an animal that I'm really connected with, so I'm really excited to see this card in this deck. I always get excited when it comes up. It's just so cute. So I'd say this deck is good for anyone who is looking for a way to connect with animals more, especially anyone who wants to get more into like channeling or connecting with sort of specific spirits, but maybe you're not necessarily into like the idea of deities or angels, or maybe you're skeptical about connecting with ancestors and stuff like that, but you still want to connect to something. I mean, you can't not believe in animals. We all know and see that they're here. So, and here's the stag spirit, the one on the front. Super powerful card. Super awesome. I think I've seen this one come up in my dreams a few times too since getting the deck. So anyone who feels a connection to animals or wants to further develop the connection with animals you already have, this is an awesome deck for you. I'd say this is also an amazing starter deck. Like if someone's looking for their first Oracle deck and they're connected to animals, I suggest this wholeheartedly because it is just so thorough. But at the same time, it is intuitive. Like once you've worked with this deck a few times, you really start to internalize the messages of each card. It's not something you're going to have to spend a lot of time studying. I feel like once you've had a card come up a couple of times, it's really just going to solidify itself. And whatever meaning that card develops to you. The wasp spirit. I've surprisingly not had this card come up almost ever. It's funny how you can have a deck for so long and, like years later you pull a card and you're like, have I ever had this card come up before? Whale spirit, trust the great mystery. And I love seeing whales depicted like this. Super big connection to whales and whale spirit for me. I also love the kind of idea of like space whales when you see in like sci-fi and stuff like that. And it looks like it's like kind of emerging from this galaxy. It's just so awesome. Wolf spirit. And then last but not least, the wombat spirit, who is also wearing a crown. So because I put all of these cards upright, I'm going to shuffle this deck really well off camera so that we have some reverse cards in the mix as well. And then we'll get into taking a look at some of the spreads provided by the deck. So right as I was finishing shuffling this deck, looking for a 1 card to start us with, the Spider Spirit card jumped out at me. So we're going to take a look at just 1 card first so I can read to you guys what it says in the guidebook for both an upright and reversed position. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at both of the 3 card spreads that are included in the deck. I'm not going to go over the 2 card spread, and I will show you why. So if you look in the guidebook here, the 2 card reading says here, the first position anchors us in the dominant thought or concept to pay attention to, and the second position tells us what to do for our next right action. And if you look at the following spread, position 1 says, what do I need to know about this situation for my highest good? Which to me is pretty much exactly the same as looking for a dominant thought or concept to pay attention to. And position 2 is what is my next right action to stay in alignment with my highest intentions, which is exactly the same as the second position on this spread. So the 3 card reading given here, the first one, is the same as the 2 card reading, but you just add 1 more card afterwards, which is where could this evolve if I remain on this path. So that's why I won't really be going over the 2 card reading. Is sort of included in 3 card reading version 1, as it's entitled here. So in this part of the video, I talk a bit about how I might do the new moon reading in this video. However, I ultimately decided to put it in its own separate video instead, since I knew that life was about to get really busy for me and I wasn't sure when this video was going to come out. I wanted to make sure that the new moon reading I give you guys is going to be up to date with the current new moon cycle. So rather than receiving a potentially weird and inaccurate reading now, you guys can look forward to watching that video when it comes out. Spider Spirit, make your dreams real. And I'm just going to read out both messages from this card. So the oracle message, the upright message, says, weaving your dreams into the fabric of life begins with a single thread of intention, and then Spirit joins you as your co-weaving partner. Take but a single step to make your dream a reality, and Spirit will take 10 toward you, for the universe is designed to support your dream weaving. Spider Spirit arrives when you need reminding of the awesome power of co-creation with Spirit. Ideas and resources will begin to appear as if by magic, as you begin to bring your dreams from the realm of intention into the world of the senses where they take form. The action you need to take is to be clear about your intentions, and then act as if you have become the one that lives the life you desire. The web of creation has an uncanny way of coming together to weave the beautiful pattern you set into motion. Another message of Spider Spirit is about any creative project you may be considering: writing, painting, music, journaling, gardening, etc. Now is the time when inspiration wants to be channeled through you as something creative, even artistic and tangible. Creative projects are successful now if you are so inclined. Let yourself be open to abundance. And then the protection message says, are you expecting your dreams to weave themselves into reality? Are you stuck in the sticky web of weaving dreams but never following through? The thread of intention isn't enough to make dreams a reality unless you do your part in the weaving. Spider Spirit wants you to know that your plans will remain ephemeral unless you commit to being productive and industrious, for Spirit will not do it all for you. Magic needs to be instigated, so begin to make your dream a reality by taking action today. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to sacrifice? Can you release your limiting beliefs? Your dream is worthy of weaving. Today is a day to choose one small step toward your dream. Remember, Spirit is your weaving partner. You just have to be the first one to bring the thread to the loom, then continue to do your part. So that card is an excellent example of how both messages given by the card are going to be pretty much the same message, but just given in a different tone. It gives you two different ways of looking at a situation, and maybe sometimes the oracle message is going to be a more effective tone for what you need in that moment, and maybe sometimes the protection message is the tone that you need to hear. And I really love the duality of the deck and the fact that it does that. You know, the gentleness and the comforting nature of this oracle deck does not prevent it from still delivering things in a matter of fact, like maybe you are causing a little bit of some of the problems in your life by doing such and such or not doing such and such. So that's really awesome. And that is just such a message that so many people need to hear on their spiritual journey as well, is that yes, manifestation is so powerful, but also if you're just in your head manifesting all the time, but not taking any action, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's what Spider Spirit has to say for us. Now let's get into some of the spreads. So if you'd like to take a moment to set your intentions for this reading or ask Spirit a particular question you would like to have answered by this deck, now is a good time to do so as I'm shuffling into our next spread. Otherwise, if you would like to just look at this as an example reading rather than something personal to yourself, or if you would like to just be pleasantly surprised by what the reading means to you, you're free to do that as well. And this deck, in my experience, does like to spend a lot of time being shuffled, so hopefully it won't take too much time to shuffle for you guys today. Don't want to bore you to death with 10 minutes of shuffling, which is often the case when I read with this deck by myself, but all right. I think we can zoom in a little as well. That looks good. So our first card, once again, is going to be, what do you need to know about this situation for your highest good? For this card, we have Giraffe Spirit. See the big picture, number 29. And I'm looking at this pattern here. It's interesting the way that they incorporate different shapes and symbols into sort of the background of the card, how it kind of meshes in with the rest of the patterning. You can see what looks like a flower-like pattern here, but it's quite subtle as it blends in with the card there. So this card is talking about, of course, seeing the bigger picture, getting a higher perspective on things, being able to see above all of the chaos and sort of take more of a bird's eye view at the situation. Not wanting to get too involved with your own personal bias, not wanting to be super involved, super in your feelings, super tense and uptight and stressed out when you think about this situation. And because the wisdom in the guidebook is just so powerful, I will be doing a quick scan of the messages in the guidebook as well to see if anything stands out as something that I feel like you guys need to hear from this. Yeah. So Giraffe Spirit says that you want to stretch your neck out and broaden your view in all aspects of your life. So not just this particular issue that this reading is talking about. Just make sure you don't overlook the details. The Spirit will bestow upon you a new perspective that might make all the difference. Super promising start to a reading. Let's see what the next position has to say. Our next position here is, what is my next right action to stay in alignment with my highest intentions? Rhino Spirit, overcome any obstacle. Awesome. I love the spiral on the rhino's forehead here and all of these beautiful pink flowers. Oh. And I love the inclusion of these like wings up on the side here. It's beautiful. You often hear the term when pigs fly, but we don't often apply that to other animals, do we? Like when rhinos fly. I mean, that sounds even more preposterous, doesn't it? Because rhinos are like just such heavy, hefty animals, right? So I'm really getting this message from this of like, no matter how heavy the weight that you have to lift feels, you can overcome it. You can lift that weight. You can overcome that obstacle. You just need to get started, really. It's really easy to be intimidated by something, especially when you haven't started working on it yet. There's a lot to be said here about looking up at something versus looking down at something with this theme of, animals flying and the giraffe spirit and the bird's eye view, where when you're down on the ground looking up at something, it looks so much scarier. You're like, oh my God, how can I overcome this? It doesn't feel possible. It's so much bigger than me. But once you start getting into the work that you need to do to overcome this obstacle, you're just going to start to elevate. Like you're just going to go straight up until you're able to reach that peak, at which point you're able to be less overwhelmed, be more like detached in a healthy way, more detached from outcomes. And you'll be able to look down at the situation and see that bigger picture. And it's amazing how those two cards just came together to form this message for us without me even having to take a look at what the guidebook has to say. There's also something I'm feeling about cycles here and about energy. What you put your energy into is where your life is going to go and how your life's going to unfold. So you might think that maybe you don't have it in you to carry all this weight and overcome this obstacle. But once you start putting your energy into that goal, things are just going to come into motion. I feel like you're going to be blessed in these next couple of weeks with a lot of insight a lot of messages from Spirit are going to make themselves more apparent to you over time. And for our third position here, we have, where could this evolve if I remain on this path? So where are we going with these heights? Butterfly Spirit! Look at that! Transformation is beautiful. Visually, I've got to say, this is one of my favorite cards in this deck. It just has so much, like, detail in it while still maintaining its simplicity. I love the artistic vision of this deck so much. So yeah, it's going to lead to transformation. Maybe you start out as someone who feels like they're on the ground, or even worse, maybe you feel like you're at rock bottom, maybe you feel like you're in a ditch. And through overcoming this obstacle, and like I said, it's not going to be perfectly easy, but it's going to be easier than you expect. Whatever it is that resonates with you right now, whatever it is you're thinking about that this obstacle means to you, is going to be easier than you expect. And so as you're going from this place sort of down in the dumps, not believing in yourself, and elevating to a higher place, and once again, we have the wings on the butterfly, right? So we're talking about transformation. We're talking about flight. We're talking about being able to elevate yourself to a higher space. And there's also a lot about unlocking beauty and expression. I think as we go further throughout these three cards, you get sort of this explosive effect, right? Where we start out with the giraffe spirit, which looks nice, but there's nothing extra going on really. There's a couple flowers in the background that I pointed out earlier, but they're just sort of in the background. You're not paying much attention to them. And then you get to the rhino spirit, suddenly you have these wings start to grow, and all of these plants and these flowers, especially coming in with the pink, so connecting to the crown chakra, connecting to those messages from Spirit that are going to come channeled in through around your third eye area, like so. That's this blossoming of this connection between you and Spirit, between you and your guides, yourself and the universe. The further you go along this process and along this journey, the more you're going to feel that like beautiful natural connection to the universe. And then when we get to the butterfly spirit, looking more at the outcomes, you have just this explosion, right, of all of this color and all of these different winged butterflies, you know, flying around, and these trails coming off of the wings, just really showing not only yourself, but showing the world the beauty of your power and what you're truly capable of. Wow. What a good reading. I love that. I love that for you guys. Let's look at what the second reading has to say for us. And for the next one, I will also be pairing it with another couple decks. Normally, this deck I will just use by itself. And if I feel like I need more information somehow, I will just pull another card from this deck because it's just so beautiful and simple and effective and comforting. And I feel like when it's the deck that I want to reach for, it's really the deck that I need to reach for. It's not just a choice that I make. It feels like it really is there for me when I need it to be. So I'll often use this deck by itself. But if I'm not using this deck by itself, I will be using it with two other decks that I have already made reviews of on this channel, which are a couple of small oracle decks, one being the 101 heart cards, and the other one being the swatches of Chakra Oracle because they just add just a little bit more clarity. And they look really good together, as you'll see when I get the reading all set up. So once again, if you want to take a moment to ask a question or create intention for what you want this reading to mean to you, you're free to do so. And fortunately, I caught that my camera stopped recording right before I got into the reading. So thank you to the powers that be for that, because I was really scared that I lost a lot more than I did, but it was really just me putting down the cards. So let's take a look at what this other 3-card spread has for us. Look at it in the guidebook first. So 3-card reading version 2. Position 1 is what is in motion now. Position 2, what are the underlying hidden influences here? And position 3, what do I do now to remain on this path or course? Correct. What do I do now to remain on this path or course correct? To remain in alignment with the highest good. Yeah, so this one is talking a bit more about the present, and then also it gives more consideration to not just remaining on the current path, but do I maybe need to change the path that I'm going down? And then I will sprinkle in a couple of these. This is the Swatches of Chakra deck by Guidebook. And Crystal Banner. Super amazing deck for like any purpose. I'm gonna put this here and this here. And we'll just include maybe one of these cards at the bottom as sort of like an underlying affirmation. I'm feeling these two, actually. So this looks like it's adding a lot more to the reading, but since these oracle decks are so simple, it might not change a whole lot. I like to use these decks as sort of clarifying tools to help pull things together. We'll start with position 1, which is, and I'm going to make sure that I read the position description verbatim. What is in motion now? Starting us off with the Dolphin Spirit. This and that are true. So what this card has to say is that there are complexities in life. There are highs and lows, there are blacks and whites, and everything in between. And sometimes we want things to be more simple than they actually are, or we even just don't stop and consider that two things we might normally consider opposite can actually be true at the same time. You know, you can love somebody and you can hate somebody. You can want to be in a job and you can also want to be in a different job. And are those two different feelings, wanting to be in a job or wanting to be in a different job, or are they the same feeling? Do you maybe want to be in the job you're in right now, but also have a second job? So this card is really taking a look at all these different nuances in life. So when we look at that in terms of what's in motion for us right now, what I get from that is that there are multiple different things that are in motion right now. There are different moving parts to the situation in your life that this reading is talking about. And I feel drawn to peek at the guidebook for this one as well. Oh. Focus on the positive, for light exists alongside the darkness. Why not join Dolphin Spirit in acknowledging and affirming the blessings present in this moment? In all areas of your life, there are aspects of both this and that. So in all aspects of your life, there are good and bad. And so it's important to honor both of those things and to acknowledge both of those things and how they interact with one another. So our next position in this reading is going to be, what are the underlying hidden influences here? Crow Spirit. Co-create with Spirit. There's that term I was talking about before. We're going to flip this card up as well. Heart Chakra card of Forgiveness. Okay. So, first thing that I get from this right away is that there's a lot of potential here. There's potential for a lot of different things. There are a lot of different ways that you can go with this situation that you're in. The world is opening up to a whole bunch of different possibilities, a whole bunch of different splitting paths. It's sort of like a crossroad energy. And right now you're really being invited to sort of co-create or manifest multiple different things at the same time. So you think, oh, I want this, but I also want that. And maybe you feel like you have to make yourself choose. Maybe you think, oh, I'm being greedy. I'm asking for too much. I should just stick with this one thing that I think I deserve, and I'll pursue that. But then in doing so, you're neglecting your heart's desire. This coming up with the heart chakra. You're neglecting your heart's desire to have more than just one thing. You know, our lives are so long and we are blessed with so much opportunity in life to do so many different things, whether it be at the same time or going through a phase of one thing and then into another. And there's also this aspect of forgiveness. So forgive yourself for the times that you failed, right? Maybe we're looking at something that you've tried to commit to in the past, but for some reason you fell off, or you didn't follow through, or you gave up in the last moment. Spirit is saying that just because you put something on hold or gave up on it in the past doesn't mean that you can't still have it in the future. It doesn't mean that you can't start working towards it again. There is no failure. There is no final, at least in this situation we're talking about, there is no final, oh, I tried it and it didn't work and that's it. So make sure that you really forgive yourself for your failures, or for mistakes that you've made or times that you've given up, because focusing on, oh, I tried that, but it didn't work out for me, or, oh, I tried, but I wasn't good enough, you know, that's just not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to help you. You really need to forgive yourself for ways that you've tripped up in the past in order to move forward with this. And then our position number 3 is, what do I do now to remain on this path or course correct to remain in alignment with the highest good? Porcupine Spirits, time for beginner mind. Porcupine Spirit. And we'll flip up this card as well as a connection card, so spiritual awareness. What are our numbers here? We got 2, 8, and 3. Okay. It's time for beginner mind. So obviously when you start with a new thing, you're not going to be perfect at it. Thinking about whether you remain on this path or course correct, I think that ironically, as we talk about like the dolphin spirit, like multiple different things being true, you can kind of do both. There's something that you're doing right now. There's a path that you're on right now that you need to continue. There's something you're doing right now that you are doing correctly, that is in alignment with your highest self, and whatever is popping up into your mind right now, that's it. Don't doubt it. Don't doubt yourself anymore. You've done that enough. And then there's also another thing that you have not yet started that is also for your highest good. So you can do both. You can remain on a path that you've been on before and continue that way. And you can also pivot and also take your life in a new direction. You know, we've got 24 hours in a day. Maybe you spend 2 hours a day with goal A and 3 hours or 30 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you can do to start committing to plan B. You can have both of those things. We have that freedom as human beings to live such complex lives. So I'm going to see what else the guidebook might have to say for us with Porcupine Spirit. And interestingly enough, I shuffled this with some reverse cards in there, and none of them came up reversed. So looks like so far Spirit doesn't have any protection messages for us, which is fine. The universe gives us what it does. When Porcupine Spirit calls your name, you're being asked to adopt a beginner's mind and to approach situations with innocence and curiosity. The old confining stories no longer have a hold on you. Life is full of surprises hiding in plain sight. Talks about looking at the world with new eyes, which is a similar message to what we got with the giraffe spirit earlier. Porcupine asks you to be playful and have a childlike curiosity. There is so much waiting for you that you have yet to discover. And that is so in line with what we've been talking about, with how human life gives us so much opportunity and so much abundance and so many blessings. You know, when you really think about how blessed we are to be able to, you know, pursue our dream job, you know, and to be able to communicate and pursue relationships with one another. And all of that stuff is just so easy to take for granted. But that is the beauty of life. So we have so much variety of things that we can accomplish. So don't be afraid to be a beginner. Don't be afraid to start something new. And even something that is not new to you, if we're continuing to talk about this like goal A, goal B situation, you know, maybe you can take a new approach and a new mindset into something that's not exactly new to you, right? And let's see what the heart cards have to say as well. The way that this card comes up for me, the spiritual awareness card, is the color of the purple really comes out to me. And I don't have anything to say about that card. I'd say that it really just affects like the tone in which I interpret and deliver the messages being brought forth here more than anything else. Then our messages from the heart cards are: allow yourself to be divinely guided, and people feel whole when they are in your presence. That is incredible. So this can bring a lot of insight about relationships, especially when we combine these two with these two here. We have forgiveness, spiritual awareness. We have the heart chakra and the third eye chakra coming in with allow yourself to be divinely guided, and people feel whole when they're in your presence. So if there's someone you need to reach out to or something that you feel like needs to be done in one of your relationships, something that involves a reaching out or a starting a conversation or starting a new friendship, a new relationship, this is a really reassuring message. I think it's also saying that you're not going to lose anything that you haven't already lost by pursuing, by reaching out, right? Really connecting back to that dolphin spirit message of you can have multiple things at the same time. So don't be afraid of like new friendships, letting new people into your life. You will have enough time, right? Sometimes we get really like worked up in this idea of time and not having enough time. Not having enough money, not having enough resources, not having enough strength, not having enough like social energy. The universe is going to give you what you need to get what you deserve, right? So get started with something new and just see where it takes you, right? So that's sort of what it might look like if you were to use a couple of other oracle decks alongside this one. Is it necessary? Absolutely not. Like I said, most of the time I prefer to read with this deck by itself because it doesn't really need anything else. It really does a good job of delivering messages on its own, especially for myself who has such a like deep and passionate lifelong connection with animals. I feel like I'm able to channel a lot of these messages myself through the use of these cards, which is amazing. So adding another deck is definitely not ever necessary, but it can be fun. So that's how I would read with this deck with some of my other decks. So that's going to be all for this video. If you like the deck and you want to get it yourself, there are a few places you can buy it online. You can get it from Colette baron-reid's official Amazon account. You can get it online from Indigo stores. And you can also buy it from Hay House at hayhouse.com. Right now it runs for about $45.99 in Canadian currency. There's also a version of it that is pocket size that comes in a metal tin. That one goes for about $23.99. And of course, there are a bunch of other websites that come up as well if you go looking for this deck online, but I cannot confirm nor deny the legitimacy of those websites. If you like this deck and you'd be interested in buying it, let me know in the comments below and let me know why you like this deck so much. If this deck is not for you, I would also love to hear about why this deck might not be for you. It's just as important to know what we don't want as it is to know what we do want, after all. I do professional readings. You can book on my website, aethericsage.com. I also do some more short collective readings on my TikTok, which is also Aetheric Sage. and I make more deck reviews and in the future other types of videos as well on my channel. So if you want to see more deck reviews or long form videos from me in the future, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell as well, so that way you are actually informed of when a new video comes out. It doesn't get lost in the never-ending feed of content that the internet loves to provide. So hopefully that answered most, if not all, of the questions you might have about this deck. I have a list of my decks on my website as well, so if you're interested in a review of any particular deck that I own, feel free to comment that in the comment section below, and I will take that into consideration because I want to review all of my decks, but I have many of them, so if there's a particular one you want to see a review for sooner than later, you might be waiting a lot longer. So if there's anything that you'd like to see me review next, let me know in the comments. I'll put a link in the description to my list of decks on my website as well. And thank you guys so much for watching my video, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye!